All right, some important developments coming in on the hearing in the Supreme Court on General V.K. Singh's age dispute. NDTV's Nitin Gokhale joins us now for more on this. Nitin, what are you hearing?
Well, we've just heard that the government, as we had reported about half an hour ago, has withdrawn its rejection of the Army Chief's statutory complaint, which was done on 30th of December 2011, which we have already said and we are reiterating that this does not make any material difference to the legal battle between the Army Chief and the government. But the Supreme Court, remember, had said this to the government last Friday, in fact, exactly a week ago, saying that the entire decision-making process in rejecting the statutory complaint of the Army Chief on the age row is a vitiated process, and therefore it is against the principles of natural justice. So either you withdraw it or we will quash it. So the government has chosen to withdraw that order of 30th December 2011 issued by Defence Minister A.K. Anthony, and now as we speak the merits of the case of the Army Chief versus the government are being heard in the Supreme Court. Vishnu?
All right. Nitin, if we look at just briefly your perspective on this, if we look at the larger issue over here, how is this more than just the age dispute of one man? How is this essentially about the fundamental equation between the armed forces and the government?
Well, certainly there have been these issues raised in various quarters. The government has also said, the government is in fact angry at the highest level that the Army Chief has chosen to go to court. Although he, as an individual, he has all the rights to go to the court, as several veterans have said. But there is, at the highest level, everybody has pointed out, there needs to be a total trust between the holder of that post, like an Army Chief, and the government, and any dispute or any differences of opinion between them is not good for the working of the ministry as well as the large force like the Indian Army. And therefore, it is a larger question, certainly, but since it is an unprecedented case, we don't know how to treat this. Should it be treated as a one man's honor and dignity and fight for honor and dignity versus the government muddling first within the army itself? He was dealt badly or very clumsily, his case, and then later the Ministry of Defence not stepping in decisively to decide on this case much before it came to this stage. All those questions are there, but certainly yes, it affects, despite the Army Chief saying that it does not affect decision making between him and the government, I think it does affect the trust levels between the government and him. Vishnu?
All right, General Arora, just wanted to read out a quote. Now, this dispute goes back several years, as you've pointed out, and in the early phases itself, there were questions raised by the Defence Ministry on why General Singh, over a period of time, continued to maintain that 1951 was his age of birth, when in fact records seem to indicate otherwise. Now, just a quote from a Joint Secretary in the Defence Ministry, Bimal Julka, who on the 21st of January 2008 wrote to the Army saying, "It is an oddity that the officer has continued to stand by a date of birth which is not officially recognized, and thereby revealing an attitude apparently questionable and not reflective of the qualities expected from an army commander. In view of this, the question of suitability of Lieutenant General V.K. Singh as army commander calls for a revisit." So this seems to indicate that for a very long time this issue has been playing up, and it has, hasn't it?
Yes.
Question marks on the general himself.
Yes, but to my mind, this kind of an observation is uncalled for. It's a straight issue.
Yeah.
He said my date of birth is 51. The MS branch at that time and the Ministry of Defence maintained it as 50. There was a need to sort it out. It has no reflection on whether suitable or not suitable for the appointment of Army Commander. To my mind, there is more to this statement than meets the eye. Yeah. I cannot say, but anyone would say, who is the Joint Secretary G at that time,
yeah,
to comment on a Lieutenant General like this. There is the promotion board which decides suitability and the appointments committee of the cabinet.
Yeah. In fact, what the General mentions over there is very much at the center of the issue. It's the equation between the Defence Ministry and the armed forces. Now, and this has gone, and the sniping between the two sides is not often revealed in public. That happens at all levels on a constant basis. If the army chief is to win this case in the Supreme Court, would the army perhaps consider it, would the institution of the army consider it somewhat of a victory, a slap on the face of the Defence Ministry, which for years and years has been sniping them on so many issues?
I don't think it needs to be viewed in that context, you know, win or loss for either side. But what this gentleman has said, this Joint Secretary GE, what does he expect? Suitability means you allow the government to trample all over you, regardless of the merits of the case. Is that what he's trying to imply? Just because he's not listening to us, so he's unsuitable to be for promotion. I don't think that is quite correct. And that is the heart of the problem, you know. The level of mistrust between the armed forces on one side and bureaucracy on the other is too much. I've seen it happening. I was MA with General Malik when he was the army chief for 2 years, and I've seen it then. And it is continuing, and it is continuing right from the time of Pandit Nehru, when he decided to keep the armed forces out of the government and therefore out of the decision-making loop, and expected the army to obey all kinds of instructions, whether wrong or right, lawful or otherwise. There's an instance which recently, which one minor functionary of the MOD has written a letter directly to the AG's branch and MS branch that reconcile your records or amend them to read his age as he has no business to do that. It's an unlawful command, and I'm glad that the army did not, carry out that kind of. Army functions on a principle of obeying a lawful command being given. This kind of a thing is unlawful.
So despite what General Thaplyal says, do you believe that there is no one united vision within the army itself? Both of you, have been speaking in a sense for what General V.K. Singh were likely to believe. But hasn't this also in a sense of created fault lines within the army itself, with so many veterans, those serving, looking up and looking at it on two ways? One, as General Thaplyal mentioned, there's a larger issue over here. There are issues between the Defence Ministry and the army, but the other issue is, what would a young captain or a tank commander out there saying, look, he's my boss and he's trying to do anything to hold on to his post? Is that the image that goes down to a 21-year-old in the field?
My feedback,
two sides.
My interaction and feedback says overwhelmingly large number of officers are looking at it as a man fighting for justice.
Okay.
And they love a fighter. So it's not about honor per se. The honor part comes in as long as the MOD keeps prolonging this case. And as you said, implying that you are a liar. Here is a man fighting for justice. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And there is support that if you are wronged, if injustice has been done, you must exercise all your rights.
We're expecting some important announcements from the Supreme Court in a little while from now. We're just trying to listen in to see if we get any of that. But that's what's happening now in the Supreme Court. The age row of the Army Chief, General V.K. Singh, is finally being heard. It's a controversy which has really dominated headlines now for the last several months. This is after it became clear that the Army Chief would insist that 1951 be seen as his official date of birth, as a result of which he believes that he's entitled to 10 months more in office as the Army Chief of India. The government, on the other hand, points out that the documents that it has with it suggest that 1950 is the age of birth which General Singh has all along accepted and was the basis on which he was made Army Chief, as a result of which they argue in the Supreme Court that General V.K. Singh needs to retire at the given time in a few months from now. Now, the Supreme Court, in its previous hearing last Friday, had observed that there was the manner in which the Defence Ministry had gone about rejecting a statutory complaint given by the Army Chief on the 30th of December seemed unfair. It had, in a sense, vitiated the process of justice to the Army Chief, and they had suggested that at that stage that the quashing of that order should be looked at once again. And therefore, in accordance with what the Supreme Court had said, the Defence Ministry has withdrawn that order of theirs, rejecting the Army Chief's statutory complaint on the 30th of December. As a result of that, all of these proceedings can now be heard on the merits of the case in the Supreme Court. NDTV's Nitin Gokhale joins us now for more on this. Nitin, any further updates, details coming in?
Well, I'm afraid, Vishnu, at the moment there are no further updates except what you just said, that the Defence Ministry and the government have withdrawn the rejection order issued by Defence Minister A.K. Anthony on the Army Chief's statutory complaint filed August last year. And now, as I said, the Supreme Court has had given them that option. So that option has been exercised, that they will withdraw the order. And therefore, the hearing, I'm told, has begun in Supreme Court, where the merits of the case are being heard. What decision the Supreme Court takes, we'll have to wait and watch, and let our colleague there, Arunachalam Vaidyanathan, tell us what exactly has happened there. But this is what the Supreme Court had said last Friday, and they have now obeyed that order instead of facing a quashing by the Supreme Court judges. And therefore, the arguments have begun in Supreme Court. That's the update I have from here, Vishnu.
Nitin, one way or the other, given the fact that time is of essence in this particular case, the Army Chief is supposed to retire in a few months from now unless the Supreme Court decides otherwise. This is likely to be a speedy affair.
Well, certainly, and the Supreme Court last Friday did one more significant thing as far as the Army Chief is concerned. They said that although the government wanted this case to go back to the Armed Forces Tribunal, which is equivalent to a High Court, since service matters are normally heard there, but the Supreme Court again came down very hard on the government and said that how can we allow that, because the officers there who are members of the Armed Forces Tribunal may have been his boss, the Army Chief's bosses earlier, or may have been his juniors. And also there is no time, they said, because this man, according to you, has to retire on 31st May 2012. And therefore, we do not allow you to go back to the Armed Forces Tribunal. So whatever happens will have to happen in the Supreme Court now. And certainly the Supreme Court hears these cases very quickly. And there is a feeling that this could end very soon, and there could be a decision one way or the other. Vishnu?
How are the other forces, Nitin, looking at this case?
Well, I really don't know. Nobody will speak to us either on record or off the record. They are all watching. They are all watching eagerly. I can tell you across the cantonments in the country, I know several people have at least called me and other colleagues who report on defense matters, that what is the likelihood, and we have all said we do not know, we cannot second guess the Supreme Court, and everyone across the cantonments in the country, I can tell you, are glued to the television sets waiting for the Supreme Court to decide one way or the other, at least give some direction. So really very hard to say which way they are looking at it. Like General Arora said, certain number of people, and I would think majority of the younger people I have interacted with, see this as one man standing against the might of the government. There are veterans and seniors who have said that he shouldn't have gone to the court. It does not behove an Army Chief to go to court. But these are all views. This is nothing to do with the facts on ground, and the facts are being now fought in the Supreme Court. Vishnu?
All right, Nitin, thanks very much for that. General Thaptial, I know you have to leave us in a little while from now, so I mean, I'll just ask you that one question. In fact, Nitin summarized it quite well by explaining how this is for the armed forces a deeply emotional issue. It's a fight for justice. That's the manner in which this is being seen, as somebody who's actually stood up for a system which has been seen to sort of proceed against the armed forces in the decision-making process over and over again. But the merits of the case still remain strong on either side, and therefore all this passion and the emotion is being kept aside as we look at it. But what's going to result is something that's going to have a profound impact on both sides.
Vishnu, I do not agree with you here that merits of the case are equally strong on both sides. Actually, the overwhelming weight of evidence is on the general side.
Okay.
Because Supreme Court has given two rulings in the past. One, that high school certificate is the authority as far as date of birth is concerned. And secondly, they have said is that nobody will meddle with date of birth. Nobody can change it. So these are two significant. I don't know why, for what reason the government is sticking to this 1950. I think a better graceful way of handling this whole issue, instead of making it a long-running saga, would have been for the Defence Minister or the Prime Minister to call the chiefs, tell him, all right, your contention is that your honour will be served if 1951 is accepted. We accept that. However, the government retains the right to retire you at any time. And I think that would have resolved this problem. Why are we hanging on to this?
It's unfortunate in a sense that there has been no compromise worked out. in the last few weeks. Both sides have remained firm. It seems that to a certain extent, General V.K. Singh would feel that his position has been strengthened considerably since the view taken by the Supreme Court a week back as well.
But do you think if the government concedes your date of birth is 51, but we want you to go tomorrow or on 30th May this year, will it stand scrutiny with the public at large? No, big no. In fact, those who are saying it's 50, they are the ones who should go home.
Colonel Kaul, let me just bring in your initial comments over here. The Supreme Court the government in fact has gone ahead and withdrawn that order of the 30th of December. While this may not affect the case per se, it just seems to indicate that we're now going to hear the merits of the argument in the Supreme Court. Colonel Kaul? All right, sorry, we seem to have lost that line with Colonel Kaul just now. So just for the benefit of our viewers joining us now, why don't you tell us what that basically implies, the government being forced to withdraw that order?
To my mind, the statutory complaint is now still pending with the government.
Right.
And they would look at it afresh without considering the advice of the Attorney General, and perhaps look at the complete evidence again and pass an order.
So
but at
no
the
order.
same
Right
time,
now there is no order.
But at the same time, it really doesn't make sense to pass an order now, because we are in the Supreme Court and both sides are being heard. So perhaps it is now redundant.
Okay.
Unless Supreme Court says, okay, we rest while you consider the statutory complaint again and give your order. If it goes in favor of the chief, there is no case. If it doesn't, we will resume hearing.
Yeah. Okay, let's just go across to Nitin Gokhale, who joins us at this stage. Nitin, anything that you can add to what we've been reporting throughout at this stage?
Yes, I believe the government has started its arguments, and Solicitor General Rohington Nariman has has told the Supreme Court that the government went by what the Army Chief in his earlier ranks accepted in writing, saying that I accept 1950 as the year of birth. And that is the expected line of argument that the government was supposed to take, because those are the letters that the government has, where he has said that I accept your decision. He is writing to the Army Chief Deepak Kapoor and saying that I accept whatever decision you take in larger organizational interest. That letter exists, or at least twice he has written same letters, or the content of the letters are the same. Twice before he became the army commander, and then he became the army chief. So the government has argued that when he has accepted this in writing, why is he now fighting for a different, for 1951? Is what the argument that the government has put forward, is what I am hearing here in Vijay Chowk. I am not in Supreme Court. This is from somebody who's inside there has said this, but as I say, I qualify this the point that I'm making by saying that this is what I've heard from people who are there in Supreme Court. So
okay,
let's wait for the final word from Supreme Court, inside the Supreme Court. Vishnu?
Okay, now assuming for a moment that this is accurate information, and we believe that it is, the government is proceeding on obvious lines, and this is what we discussed earlier on, basically having written 2 letters to his former chief, General Kapoor, saying that no, whatever it is, I will accept whatever it is that you believe is in organizational interest. Now he seems to be contradicting that, and the argument which has been raised in the past is that yes, the general did write those letters saying that I will accept 1950, but he did that under duress. What was that duress?
It's common knowledge. The duress was that the chief at that time had, along with the MS, been involved in the Sukhna case. His own military secretary had been involved there. So again, it is common knowledge that things were not all right between the then Army Chief and General V.K. Singh. And General V.K. Singh perhaps was apprehensive that some kind of action may be taken for defying the orders of the chief or the army headquarters, in this case, when they were asking, laying down unrealistic timelines or deadlines for him to accept what they were saying. But there was also a possibility the army headquarters could have withdrawn his name from being considered for promotion.
Right.
Right or wrong? If wrong, he would have to fight for that justice to be done, in which case the case could have dragged on and he would have missed the boat. So perhaps he was advised to give something in writing, but with a qualification or a rider added that in the national interest or in the service interest. But I'm sure, as I have read, he challenged it later on, still saying that you had promised that you will look into the date of birth and sort it out, which has not been done.
Okay. Colonel Anil Kaul, can you hear me now, sir? All right, we still don't have him over there, but just to once again go through the main new development that we're getting, and we're just getting little blurbs of information. We expect to get something much more substantive in the next little while. The Defence Ministry has thus far, we are told, been arguing on anticipated lines, basically saying that the Army Chief had already in writing submitted a couple of letters to his former chief saying that 1950 was acceptable to him as his age of birth, as his date of birth, and therefore the entire series of arguments with regard to his age being his date of birth being 1950 or 1951 needs to be put to rest. It was on the basis of these assurances that he was actually made Army Chief. And those who question the General say that if you've actually signed, as does the Defence Ministry, they basically say that if you've signed these documents, then why change that now? Let's go back to Nitin Gokhale at this stage. Nitin, therein lies the rub. If he had accepted in writing 1950 as his age of birth, for whatever the reasons were, even if they were under duress, those who criticize General V.K. Singh would argue that a man of his rank, his integrity, the number of years he's put in service, needs to find a way of dealing with pressure and doing what he believes to be true. In other words, if he believed 1951 was correct then even then he should have said, no, 1951 is corrected. Not for a moment should he have said that 1950 is his accepted date of birth.
Well, certainly one can argue on those lines, and his critics have already said this, that he should have stood up at that point in time. But as you have heard General Arora and others saying that you never know what a person does at that particular moment, what goes through his mind, what are the compulsions that he takes that decision. Was it a tactical retreat to live to fight another day, or was it something that allurement of becoming the Army Chief was much stronger than standing up for what he thought was right? All that the Army Chief will have to answer. Perhaps when he retires, eventually, whenever he retires, he will be able to answer it if he writes an autobiography or a book. I cannot answer why he did this. Nobody actually can answer why he accepted that. But let's assume that he accepted this and the government appointed him. The government had all the opportunity again when this came up in 2011 to sort this matter out and call him in and say that, look, you have accepted this, now you better stick to what you have accepted, and we will deal with it internally, instead of allowing this entire row to come out in the public like this and take the shape that it has taken. So therefore, there are both merits and there are arguments on both sides of the divide. It's futile for us to get into that argument, because it is the Supreme Court who is going to decide now. And as I speak to you, I've just got a report from PTI saying that the Attorney General has told the Supreme Court that the government order of July 21st and 22nd of 2011 rejecting the Army Chief's plea prior to his statutory complaint stands. That means, as we reported 2 days ago, the government is sticking to its stand that they will maintain the Army Chief's year of birth as 1950. Come what may, let the Supreme Court decide, but they're going to fight it out in the Supreme Court, is what we are now learning from a report of PTI which has come in, saying that the Attorney General has argued on the expected line, saying that he gave it in writing. Solicitor General also said this, and the order of 21st July and 22nd July rejecting his plea to treat his year of birth as 1951 stands. That means the government has hardened its stand, and there is going to be no compromise or no via media in this row that has taken the shape that it has taken in the Supreme Court now. Vishnu?
Okay, prior, Nitin, to what we are seeing now, this battle in the Supreme Court, what was the role of the Defence Minister, A.K. Antony? Because he was silent for a long period of time. He didn't want to be drawn into any public statements on this entire controversy. Perhaps had hoped that it would all go away, that it would be dealt with. But what was his role in handling this entire crisis?
Well, again, very little is known publicly or in public domain what the Defence Minister was thinking, because he has never chosen to say anything on this issue, except for one remark he made the other day, a fairly longish remark, saying it is the army to be blamed, and that the army maintained 2 sets of dates of birth for the current army chief for 36 years. So why are you making it into a civil-military kind of a confrontation, which itself was taken as a very kind of irritating, indication of the Defence Minister's irritation at this whole issue becoming public and finger pointing towards him. So what we have been looking at for the past 1 year or so is that the Defence Minister has this style of functioning where he relies a lot on his officials, on everything, in fact on acquisitions, on all the decisions. He let them be. He allows them to take the decision, and perhaps he thought in this case his officials, his officers were taking the right decision. He did not want to come out in public. He kept on telling us whenever we confronted him with this issue, saying this is a very sensitive matter, not to be discussed in public, please don't raise these issues. All that he kept saying, but clearly that has not worked. Somewhere the Defence Minister would have had to actually stand up and take a firm view, which he should have taken maybe way back in July, August or December 2011. His critics now say that he did not take that firm stand. He depended too much on official advice, and also appended the Attorney General's opinion in rejecting the statutory complaint of the Army Chief, which went against the government last week in Supreme Court. So therefore, some question marks on the decision-making process, both of the Defence Ministry as well as the Defence Minister. Vishnu?
All right. General, 2 important developments. Firstly, the orders of the 21st of July and the 22nd of July. These were the initial assessments made by the Defence Ministry, saying that the Army Chief's arguments were not accepted. Those orders stand. So while the order of the 30th of December has been withdrawn, the earlier order stands. So as Nitin was pointing out over there, it seems that the government is ready to fight. Secondly, the other piece of information we now have is that the Solicitor General, Rohinton Nariman, has cited, according to the Press Trust of India, 3 letters of General Singh to say that he has been unequivocally given his personal rights. In other words, the chief believes that there was no injustice to him. 1950 was acceptable. So could you just basically summarize the implications or where the Defence Ministry is perhaps arguing on the basis of these 2 things that we know?
Yes. You see, we are told in the army that before you launch a statutory complaint or even a non-statutory complaint, you must write to your superior,
yes,
bringing out what wrong has been done. And maybe he will satisfy you or redress your grievance. And then, if you are not satisfied, you file a complaint under the Army Act, which the chief has done. He had taken it up with the government, that his date of birth is 51. And in July it was rejected. When he went for the statutory complaint, it appears now that the government will give the same ruling as they had given in July, although it will be examined theoretically. So that I think one should no longer give any more weightage to. But now, having said so in the Supreme Court, is this the main sticking point, main argument of the government? If it is so, we are yet to hear the other side. Of course, this will be brought out that he was under duress, he was given no choice, and what happened in addition to what we know. But the point is, when the chief's side gives their arguments, and if it is accepted that his date of birth in the birth certificate and in the high school certificate is 51, and he had brought it out at that time to the UPSC, and that's the procedure, and it was accepted. All this is infructuous.
Yeah.
Whether at any time the chief of the army headquarters asked him to give in writing or an undertaking, or the MOD saying 2 records are being maintained. But mind you, as far as these two records being maintained in Army headquarters, even within the MS branch, it was 1950 and 51 being maintained. Some papers say 51, some papers say 50. So it's just that the initial mistake in the UPSC form found its way into the MS branch records and it was maintained as 50. But in many of the promotion boards, in the master data sheet which is placed before every member of the promotion board, it showed 51. But the official record keeper, as they say, is the AG's branch. I can tell you, in the Army list, my own date of birth was shown wrong by 1 year, although more favorable to me, unlike this case. I was born in 52 and it reflected 53. The first Army list which came out in which my name was reflected was 7 years after I got commissioned. The next one came out perhaps after 10, 12 years. I wrote maybe 10 to 12 letters to the Army headquarters through proper channels saying my date of birth has been printed wrongly. It was never corrected. Even in the last Army list which I saw, had not been corrected. I let it be because they go by the AG's branch records when it comes to pension, when it comes to giving any official certificate or document.